Welcome back, everybody, to another live recording edition of the Middle-earth in Mercia podcast. We've got a bit of a special episode for you because it's a special occasion. We've had a new edition, version, rulebook, what have you, of the game announced. Everybody's been talking about it, but we wanted to just give it a little bit of time, let it settle in, let the dust clear and the information become clear once we've sort of had a bit of a think about it, so that we can sit down and really sort of have a informed discussion about the new edition and what it means to us as fans of the Middle-earth strategy battle game. So I'm really happy to say we've actually got the video working this time successfully. So I'm joined by, as usual, Ash. Say hello, Ash.
Hi, everyone.
And once again, friend of the podcast and host of Great Bear Gaming, which you can find all the links to down below in the video, James Patterson.
Hello.
You two are always absolutely cracking introductions. That's why I like having you here. You make me seem gregarious. But yeah, so let's just get things rolling. I guess I can make a bit of a statement and then we can take it from there. How do we all feel about the announcement of a new edition? Without going into any of the details, because we're going to all of that, I, on the whole, think it's really, really good for the game. It gives Games Workshop an opportunity to market it to people, once again, to put it in the spotlight, bring new players in, and I think most importantly for a lot of us, the idea that there is at least the possibility of plastic models being reintroduced to the range once again as sort of warriors. So who wants to jump in first?
Well, Ash, your co-host, so it seems right.
Yeah, so mic problems. I'm excited by it, but also a bit apprehensive because it's a whole new set of rules to learn, and I don't quite know every single rule in the current game. So there is that. I guess it'll be good because we'll, like we said offline, we think everyone's going to be on a more level playing field in terms of the tournament side of things. So if you are a new player coming into the game, now's a good time to sort of start picking it up because everyone's sort of learning it from afresh. I guess there will still be some nuances that carry over, but I think a positive attitude, but a bit of apprehension there as well.
Okay. And what
What are you
about
thinking, James?
And what about yourself, James? You're probably, in terms of going to tournaments, you're more seasoned than either of us. What's your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that sort of makes my opinion any more valid. I'm also not particularly great at it, but it's I think I'm sort of closer to Ash in the sense that I think that it's really, really positive for the game, and I think it's, you know, a net positive, and there's a lot of sort of opportunities there. But I think that's sort of tempered with some apprehension on a few things. Obviously, they've sort of indicated a few changes to army building, which is a bit concerning, and then putting stuff in legacy lists, and just whether the general direction will be what we all sort of hope it would be. But I suppose we've all got different hopes for the game, so I suppose some people are always going to be happier than others. But I think it's broadly positive. But
I mean, I guess because we're going to delve into those details because there is a lot of information that's been released, which I think is quite unusual for Games Workshop, like 3 months out to have released this much information. But, you know, if you were to choose new edition or no at this point in the game, what would you both say? So starting with yourself, Ash, new edition or no?
I guess I'd ask another question to that as well is, do we think the current game is broken enough that they needed to bring out a new edition? Because I don't think it's that broken. You know, like, we both played 40k, don't we, Sonny? I don't know about you, James, but 9th was really broken, so they sort of needed 10th to sort of reinvigorate the game, whereas do you think this game is broken enough to need a new edition?
I don't. In reply to that, before I hand over to James, I don't think it's broken at all, but I do think it's incredibly stale. I've only sort of properly been on the tournament scene for about 2.5 years now. And, you know, army list writing does not supplant pure player skill, but you can reasonably guess 75% of the lists that are going to podium at 90s and 100s. And it's been falling on tournament organisers for a while to stir up the meta, really, which I don't think is healthy in the long term. What do you think, James?
I suppose it's a bit unhelpful, but I'm a bit more sort of ambivalent in that I think, you know, I could have quite happily gone on in this current edition for, you know, like 2 or 3 years or something, and not really sort of bat an eyelid. But I think there are things that can be improved with the game. So, you know, I think it's good that there's a new edition, but I suppose it's just, you know, if, you know, they're releasing a new edition soon, I'm happy about that. If they hadn't released one for another 2 or 3 years, I think I'd have been pretty indifferent to that as well, to be honest. So I'm sort of, you know, happy enough that they're releasing it, but it's not like, for me, it's not sort of exciting in the sense that I don't think it's sort of re-energizing a game that kind of needed re-energizing. I think it's just, and you're right, there is a bit of staleness to it, but, you know, if, I suppose it's, you know, could they have FAQ'd a few legendary legions or something, or, you know, is a new edition better because it goes beyond what an FAQ could do? So I suppose I'm a bit more, a bit more sort of ambivalent and harder to pin down, I suppose.
I think I might have to. I didn't really expect this, but I think I might have to be the energy of the night in terms of positivity. But yeah, okay, let's leave that there for just the pure idea. I think we have to get past the elephant in the room before we can sort of focus on the main focus of the night, which is to talk about the recent supplement that has just dropped. It's going to be coming out in through the post system in about a week from now, and that is the Rise of Angmar. Which has seen the release, I think, of 13 new profiles and the rejigging of 1. We've got Warriors of Khan Doom. We've got a couple of things added to the Angmar list. We've got a couple of things added to the Arnor list. And then I think we've got 11 new legendary legions, which stretch from Elves and Numenor for the Battle of Fornost through to whatever the host of the Witch King. Arnor's got one. There's one that's all about wolves. I think werewolves are obviously a big story. Just to sort of plonk out the topic of discussion on this one, I think I would have been really excited about this 12 months ago. And it just really sort of feels like it's being pushed over the threshold. At this point, so we'll release this tomorrow, so it's going to have been about 4 days since pre-orders went up, but 75% of all the pre-order stuff is sold out now, which says to me, we didn't make a lot, we're just doing enough to support the supplement. The actual supplement itself is half the size of most of the books. I know it's got a reasonable amount of content in there, but that sort of suggests maybe there's not as many scenarios and things people might be hoping for. It just feels very, very redundant, and I think most people that aren't super meta players, and even the super meta players, probably aren't going to go after this because it doesn't really make anything like huge changes. Maybe if you were looking at doing an Arnor list, you're going to pick one of them up because they've become stronger. But it just feels like, all right, here it is. Everyone's going to have forgotten about this in 3 months when the new edition gets here. So what do you think, Ash?
Yeah, what's the average time between new books?
Oh, that's a hard question because we've had such a large break.
Yeah, I guess because we've had such a large break.
Out. So I think Gondor at War came out. I think there was a reasonable gap to War in Rohan, and then so I only got into it when War of Rohan was out, and I think there were sort of reasonable gaps, and I think a couple released in quick succession. So I think the Fall of the Necromancer and War in the North, and the one before that with Quest of the Ring Bearer, they were fairly close, but I think this is the biggest gap, isn't it? But I don't think there's any set set sort
Yeah,
of.
I think we've seen it's at least an 18-month gap. Maybe is like pushing a year, 2
Yeah.
years.
It's a very Game Workshop thing to do, though, isn't it? To release a supplement and then bring out a new edition 3 months later. Like, I think I remember the same thing happening in 40k, where they released a load of codexes for Chaos Space Marines, and then here you go, we're going to bring out a new edition. So
Well, there was a very
there is that.
sorry, I'll let you carry on, Ash, after this. But
I guess it's all depending on how playable these new models will be within the new game, and I guess the new, I can't remember what they're called, but the new like evil men that they've released for Arnor, and maybe paving the way for new sculpts for Dunland. They look very Dunlandish
they've got very Dunland rules.
Yeah, so have they sort of paved the way to sort of maybe start bringing that Dunland theme in? Because we know that the new film is going to be probably majority Rohan Dunland, so are they paving the way for bringing those models in? And how much of a factor does Arnor play in that? And Angmar?
None at all. That's what I mean. I think this is just, as soon as a new edition drops, nobody cares about this. What about yourself, James? Because I know you're a bit of a completionist with the expansions. Is this one you're going to pick up?
Yes, but I'm either going to wait until the new edition drops and then try and get one cheap off somebody, or I haven't pre-ordered it, or I'll just, go into a few gaming stores in the near future. So, if I see it there, I might just grab it just to make sure I get it. But yeah, I'll get it for the scenarios, but it's very untimely, basically, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think, like you said, if it had come out a year ago, nobody would have any complaints at all, and everyone would be, excited. And even if you told them at the time, like, look, there's going to be a new edition in a year, it's just like, well, you got a whole year of gaming. Whereas, how many tournaments are you going to go to in the next 3 months?
Yeah.
And do you have time to buy the models, paint the models, build a list, take it to a tournament? How many times are you going to do that? But before the new edition drops, it's just it's frustrating as well, because I think this one is one that loads of people really wanted to see, because obviously Arnold versus Angmar is like very, despite the fact it happened 1,000 years before the War of the Ring, it's very, very Lord of the Rings, and it's a great part of the lore. And just the breadth of the releases has actually been really surprising in a good way. It's really filled out the Arnor roster quite nicely.
Do you think that goes too far though? Because they're almost a list without weakness now. Almost.
I think, yeah. Well, you could sort of argue that before, they had no cavalry, and then, we got cavalry now, and then.
Access to another Fight 5 striker as well.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so it's kind of, you could definitely make the argument it's patching weaknesses. On the Arnor side of things, I think the army of Arnor Legendary Legion is a bit redundant as well, because, I mean, most people just take vanilla. I suppose the only thing it stops you doing is allying, but other than that, it's just kind of everything that's in the Arnor roster.
I think the only minus to it is that you lose access to the Hobbit archers.
Oh no! That's the horn, but
yeah, I know they weren't taken en masse, but they're kind of like their version of Orc trackers, aren't they? The 5 points and it fires a bow, pretty nice and cheap, and now you've got to go for a ranger.
Yeah, I never saw anyone sort of. I mean, I'm sure people did, but at a tournament, I haven't seen anyone take it. I think people may drop one for a horn to sort of go up to strength 3. Courage 3 maybe, but
that could be useful with the cavalry as well, because they're more likely to be away from the fearless bubble.
Yeah, exactly. So that's fine, but bearing in mind that most people never took it, and then I think it speaks to a wider discussion about legendary legions, to be honest. But it just kind of makes the worst rule of Arnor central to the army of Arnor. So rather than focusing around something sort of more flavorful and giving them a nice bonus in relation to that, like I don't know whether they're better at fighting spirits or whatever. I have no idea. or even resistant to magic because they're used to fighting Angmar. I have no idea, but instead they've sort of taken the most annoying rule that requires no thought and just made it more egregious.
Yeah, I mean, I would say anybody that has played multiple systems or played wargaming in general for some time knows that two of the most powerful things you can have are rerolls and additional saves, because in general they always apply. Plus ones are good, but it's also it can be situational. It can be 80% of the time it's useful. Rerolls are always useful. In that, I'm referring to basically all the Ringwraiths getting the Crown of Morgul in the Angmar. And then the saves, I'm referring to the 5-up save on Malbeth and the 4-up save for heroes. Which, before we move on, because we will in a minute, I do want to say, I don't understand why people just keep saying, oh, the 4-up is only on heroes, as if that's not really, really good. It's not crazy to think that somebody could take 3 wounds and pass all 3 of those saves, or pass 2 of them and then have a fate save. That is really powerful, and in higher point armies, especially with the presence of the Dunedain in the list now, that has the
How
opportunity.
annoying is that going to be?
Yeah, that has the opportunity to be really good. If you've got a bubble and you've got 2 Dunedain and 2 of their new moderately powerful heroes, that's going to be really hard to crack through.
Yeah, I think even their lack of fate, because I think all of them have 1 fate, don't they? But even, I mean, yeah, the warriors still get 5-up, don't they? It's just and the heroes get 4-up, so it's still
sort of
bad.
like free fate in a way, I guess.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I also think it's something that a lot of sort of content creators have spoken about with 40k, and it was absolutely prolific in 9th edition and has got a little bit better in 10th edition. But the idea of rerolls and these additional saves, that it takes away your opportunity for heroic moments. You have got I don't know, let's think of maybe a common orc. 2 orcs are fighting somebody, and against the odds they take them down and they score those 2 wounds, and now they've got the opportunity of 2 50/50s on those wounds, and it just takes away, it pushes things more in favour of those more powerful models. And same with the Witch King of, maybe he's coming after you and he rolls 3 dice, fluffs them all, and then he's got the opportunity for another reroll. I think it slims. Do you see what I'm saying? It slims down the odds of the unlikely happening when you've got these rerolls and additional saves.
I think those things are fine, but they require setup, don't they? So the shaman, his channeled fury, that costs a might, and probably throwing 2 will at it, and he's that's the only thing he's doing. And there's a chance it won't work anyway, because I think you need a 3-up on 2 dice, which isn't impossible to fail, which is always annoying. But that costs you something. You have to put it in the list. You have to put him in the right place. You have to keep him safe. There's stuff that can deal with him. And likewise for the rerolls, you have to, positioning a banner is a skill. So I think it's the concept. Those concepts aren't bad. I think it's just they kind of need to be sort of considered where it's appropriate to use them, and just giving people flat saves and rerolls does sort of detract from sort of the skill element a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, I guess I don't have a problem with banners, and I don't have a problem with fury saves, because they're minimal, and it almost is a heroic if you make that 6-up save on the fury, that almost is a heroic moment in itself, because it's unlikely, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
When you roll that 1 reroll on a banner, and you've just rolled 5 dice and not what you needed, and you get the 6, that's an electric moment because it was unlikely.
Yeah.
I guess what I was getting at with these new legendary legions, I don't know whether it's maybe just a bit lazy rules writing, what can we do to arbitrarily make these armies better, or are they starting to look at their other systems and bring in these kind of bubble effects, which I don't think really has a place in this game.
I don't know, because you look at those 2 and they seem pretty good, and then you look at the other 3 and they're actually pretty guff. So
No, I'm not.
I don't know basically, but it's an interesting thought, isn't it?
Yeah, it seems slightly those two legions, the Angmar one and the Arnor one. I wouldn't actually say the Angmar one is overpowered just because of the list restriction, especially with the werewolves coming in. You do lose quite a lot by having those list restrictions. But the Arnor one, I don't really like that. I think although I would like to play the army because I like the idea of a D6 horde. I think that could be quite fun.
Well, too bad because they're sold out, and
Yeah,
by the time they're back
yeah.
in stock, the new edition will have dropped.
Yeah, and I don't think it's broken. It just does seem to be a slight change in direction. But anyway, let's move on. We've spoken about the latest supplement. Everybody's here to talk about the new edition. Now, at the time of recording, it's the 27th. So on Thursday, we may well see new information released. So we're not going to be covering that if that is included. But at present, there's sort of a number of things they have announced that are going to change. So the two that I think we can whip through rather quickly is the changing of the in the way rules to 4-up. Sorry, my light has just gone off. To 4-up and getting rid of special strikes. And I have a feeling that nobody's going to have particularly strong feelings on this. For me, the 4-up in the way, I think that's how 90% of situations were played anyway. I don't really see that as a problem. And the removal of special strikes, I find it slightly annoying because I've got tons of orcs that I've modelled with picks now, which are completely pointless. But I don't think it have a massive impact on the game. Ash, is somebody that I think you probably forget these quite a lot. What do you think?
Yeah, in the way, I don't think I've ever played it for 3+ and 4+ and etc. I think I've always just played it 4+ at tournaments, so I don't think that really changes a lot in my opinion. I guess for immersion into the game, I guess someone standing behind like a massive wall versus standing behind a little gate. You could argue that you've got more cover behind the big wall, but I think
it's a slight reduction in narrative.
Yeah, I think that immersion of the game, it's a slight reduction in that, but I don't think it's gonna really affect how the game's played. So most people probably play it as 4+ anyway. And then the special stuff, I don't ever use them, so I can't really comment on that. Which is
bad as you're a Rohan player, because that's really useful with your axes.
Yeah, I always forget to use that, so I'm not going to miss that because I don't use it now.
James?
So in the ways, I was probably one of the few people who actually liked the differentiation and the and actually used it from time to time. 90% of the time, it's just a straight 4-up and there's no sort of qualms about it. But if I sort of slap a weak field down or something, I just tend to say little players open and a 3-up in the way, because obviously it's obscuring but not really giving cover.
Yeah.
So I liked it, and again, occasionally I've played siege battles for narrative, and 5-up feels right. If someone's behind, the sort of the deeping wall or something at Helm's Deep, it kind of feels like I got a bit more protection, so it feels right. But equally, sort of going back to the old way of just everything being 4-up, it's whatever, fine. That's that's okay. It kind of keeps things simple, and if nobody's really using it, then fair enough. And then what was the other thing? I remember.
Special strikes.
So that's one thing I had to learn when I got into this edition, because I'd only played sort of Blue Book before the Hobbit stuff came out, and then when I properly got back into Lord of the Rings in the current edition, sort of nearer the start of the current edition, I had to learn all the special strike stuff, and I like it because it's an extra layer to the game, but also yes, it does slow the game down sometimes unnecessarily, and then if you've got two players who know the game and know how to optimize special strikes, a lot of the time there's just sort of an understanding of what you're going to do anyway. so that's fine. Yeah, I don't really mind it. I think the only thing is that some armies rely on it to be killy. So things that spring to mind are like orcs. So they particularly like access to axes to go up to strength 4.
Yeah.
And so do I think elves as well, because with elves, when you rank up, knowing when to two-hand is a skill, but also feinting to reroll those ones with like the front elf. I think that's quite important to them actually being able to kill stuff. But then I know on the flip side you have like, Goblin Town who will have picks, and it's just a complete pain in the bum, because obviously why would they not special strike every single time, because they're defense 3 anyway. So if you kind of, again, like, I'll be sad to see it go, but whatever.
So to play Mr. because it sounds like I need to play Mr. Positive today. To play Mr. Positive on it, I do think that it gives an opportunity for a genuine rebalance on the rules in terms of weapons and profiles. Because especially when you look at the points, like Goblin Town, I think that was an oversight that they could get up to strength 4.
I think that's how they modelled the plastic models.
Yeah,
and then they're like, oh no.
it doesn't make sense for the points that they can get up to strength 4.
No.
And like, whereas some models, like Riders of Rohan, if you just strip them of having access to the axe, unless they have a significant change in points, that profile suffers even more, because they already struggle to compete with Royal Guard, despite having the bow.
Well, did you play old school, like Blue Book, where you had a Rider of Rohan charging an Uruk? Obviously, the Uruk's more likely, well, not more likely, but obviously he's fight 4, so he has that advantage.
Yeah.
And then he's killing on 5s. And then you're like, great, I've knocked him down, still need 6s. It's just like having that axe is just super, super handy. So I'm not trying to sort of be misery guts about it. I think it's like, it's fine. That's the, it simplifies it. It's better for new players, because you sort of, sometimes at a tournament when you're playing a new player and they, say, well, I'm gonna special strike. I don't know what that is, and then it's just like, well, and then you don't special strike because you don't want to basically do a gotcha, because that's one of the good things about Lord of the Rings. There aren't really many gotcha moments, so you find yourself not special striking to, basically not make them sort of feel put out and stuff. So I suppose I don't disagree with it, but I suppose it's just like you said, there's implications for sort of balancing, I suppose.
Yeah, I just think that on the whole, with a new edition, there is opportunity here, and that's what I'm staying hopeful for. And if they just take axes and pixies away from orcs and away from Riders of Rohan, and there's nothing put in place, like I've seen some people suggest that maybe certain profiles could still get the potential benefit, like for instance saying Riders of Rohan just get the opportunity to do the piercing strike, like as a rule, or
that's what I was about to say, is
elves get fainting, for instance.
So they keep the special weapons, but lose, like, if you've got a sword, the ability to feint.
Well, yeah, rather than being attached to the weapon, it's attached to the profile.
Yeah. No, that's totally, that's fine. As long as you don't sort of bloat the individual rules or whatever. But it's just a balance.
Or in the case of goblins, like, take it off them, because it doesn't make sense with points. With orcs, I think they need some. Like I think, for instance, orcs, they could maybe do with something like when they outnumber or something, getting backstabbers, that sort of thing. I think you could bring in. It doesn't have to be exactly that, but I think you could potentially bring in like thematic rules that make sense for that kind of model, because that's how orcs kill in the books, isn't it? They're not skilled fighters. They're not particularly strong. They gang up on you. They get you in the night. They get you when you're sleeping. Those sort of things.
Yeah, I think maybe more army rules, like you're saying, might be a good thing. At the minute, there's only like, you get this one little army rule for having the army. If they're getting rid of how you make a list, like they're giving more Legendary Legion style rules. Because at the minute you only get like 1 or 2, don't you, for having the army. Maybe they need to start bringing in those army specific rules.
So does anyone have anything they passionately want to say on this before we move on to the next one?
I think so.
Okay. So the next one I think is actually something that has been mostly wrongly overlooked just because of how big the final point we're going to talk about. But it's that they've stated there is going to be more distribution of the fight skill matrix. That at the moment we have 1 to 10, and the vast majority of models only utilise 2 to 5. And that there's going to be a further separation of that. And I think, to sort of just put the topic out there and then let you guys discuss. I think this could be really, really good. If, for instance, perhaps goblins and orcs are 2. You could have men at 3, skilled men at 4. And then like elites at 5, and then only sort of elves moving into 6, and we could see more of those elite heroes maybe operating in the 7 to 8 area, that sort of like the Fellowship do now, and keep the captains down sort of 5 and 6. I think this could be really, really good and sort of differentiate the armies more, because at the moment we've sort of seen, if you don't have access to Fight 5, then you might as well just go for a Horde army. With the exception of a few, like Black Numenorians are super efficient, and getting to Fight 4 in that army makes sense. But for the majority, it's like, I've either got Fight 5 or I'm a Horde. What do you think, Ash?
Yeah, I think I agree with you there on that. I think it would be nice to see a broader range of fight skill. And it's things like when you look at certain models' fight skill versus another model's fight skill, and it's like, oh, really? They're the same fight skill as something like that. It's like, okay, that doesn't seem right in terms of sort of the storyline of the whole thing. So yeah, I think that broadening of the fight skill would be quite a good thing.
What about yourself, James?
Yeah, I think like 100% is a good thing. I think they'd have to have a look at it as part of the new edition, or no matter what they did, and whether they increased the cap from Fight 10 to 15 or 20 or whatever, had a bigger spread, or whether they just redistribute it, because you're right, you don't really see much sort of Fight 1 or Fight 7, 8, 9. So actually, just spreading it out, and I think it was needed to address the fight creep as well, because I think before, Fight 3 wasn't sort of a crisis, whereas then it became, there's quite a lot of Fight 4 out there, so how do I get Fight 4 on my list? And then obviously got the Dragon Emperor and stuff come out the awnings, and now it's suddenly like, how can I get to Fight 5? And it kind of sort of got a bit silly. And you're right, if you're going for high fight, you can sort of, a lot of time you can get away with Fight 4, but then, if you come up against, like, say, Dragon Emperor or Beornings or something, then obviously you can't. And then you're right, it kind of reaches a point where you're like, well, if I can't get a decent fight, then I'd have to spam something. So it kind of, but I realise as I'm saying it, that's like an extremely tournament player complaint. So a lot of people probably don't have that problem. But I think that overall, like, so I'm trying to sort of just waffling, but overall, I think it's really good. I think it's definitely needed, and I think it's just gonna be really positive and sort of just rebalancing some of those profiles in a way that makes a bit more sense.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we like to play at tournaments, and we like to play mostly, obviously they're more relaxed when we play at home, but we play match play guide games a lot, so we are going to be quite slanted towards that. I do remember back in the day when I used to play I think at the time they were just Durin's folk rather than Khazad-dûm, but they were Fight 4, and it was like, we're properly elite, unless I come up against elves, and there's going to be a lot less of them.
But that feels right, doesn't it?
Yeah. I've seen some people suggest maybe you could also work in maybe if you've got double fight skill, if there's going to be that much separation, like maybe an elf versus a goblin, maybe the elf gets some sort of benefit for that additional like doubling of the fight skill. That could be interesting if done well. Obviously it would need to be balanced.
I think they do that for other systems. I think obviously comparing weapon skills is how you hit in Old World, so they might do that, because it might also make up for not being able to feint. Is if you're like, well, you'll fight 2 and fight 5, I get +1 to my dual roll or something like that. That kind of could potentially be. I don't know. That could be cool, but
yeah, I think this one.
Yeah, there's nothing more annoying than if you both roll a 6 and you're the same fight skill, but you're like, I don't know, an elf versus an orc captain or something.
My most hated is when I've got like 4 models on one person with equal fight skill. I roll my 4, get 2 6s, and they get 6 with their single one, and then I lose the roll off. I know, like I said earlier, that's those heroic moments. It is a dice game; it's going to happen. But yeah, maybe something. I don't know. Maybe a rejigging of the fight skill matrix could change that a bit. I don't know. Okay. On to which I think is the biggest confirmed sort of thing. We are actually making good pace, which is unusual for this podcast and this group. So we might have time to sort of talk about a few broader issues, because I think we're going to try and keep this to sort of an hour 15. So we've got about half an hour left. The biggest news was that there is going to be a shift towards how armies are sort of mustered, really. And in my abandoned video I was going to do for my sort of hopes and aspirations for the new edition, which this story has been moving so quickly that I sort of made my slides for that and then was like, okay, this is all irrelevant. I was really hoping that how armies are constructed is going to change, because I think this is one of the biggest things that I mentioned earlier in terms of things being stale, that have become the stalest. In that, if you go to a 400 points event, you can very quickly, rapidly reel off 5 that are potentially going to be good at that, and 5 things that are just no-goes. And Legendary Legions especially are particularly susceptible of this. Like, you don't want to play Host of the Dragon Emperor at small points. And other big Legendary Legions which have that mandatory central character often fall foul of the smaller points and are just useless at that. And for us being, I guess, casual competitive players doing one-day events, many of the events we attend are on those smaller sides. So what I was hoping to see was a general rejigging maybe of warband sizes and the Heroes of Fortitude and independent heroes and things like that, to maybe give better flexibility to the army lists, so that you don't fall into these trapfalls of, like, what was it I was looking at? I think it may have been a Mordor. Yeah, I think it's a Mordor Serpent Horde alliance. Really doesn't work nicely at 550. You can't. The points just don't match up quite right for what I was looking for, to sort of avoid those situations. But yeah, they're moving more towards Legendary Legions. My big fear is that this is going to make the game more restrictive. That there's going to be certain Legendary Legions that we know, for instance, the Games Workshop specifically playtest at 700, that are going to work mint at 700, and then at our one-day events with 600, 550, 500, they're just not going to work, and you're only going to have one option for that army. I've rambled quite a bit, so I'll hand over to you guys. We can go back and forth on this. Let's go to you, James, because we've been going to Ash first before.
Oh, okay. I suppose the starting point is what's wrong with the way things currently work. I think, personally, I don't think there's anything wrong with how things currently work. I think the thing that's upset the apple cart is the Legendary Legions are too good. I think if the Legendary Legions were dialed down a notch, then it wouldn't be so bad. Because I think the problem is that when you've got, like Rohan, and you're like, well, I'm going to take a cavalry Rohan list, and you just take Riders of Theoden.
Yeah.
And then if you're like, well, I want to run an infantry list, it's just like Helm or Theodred, depending on points. And then, you've got, that's kind of the crux of the problem, is why would you not take those options when they're manifestly better? I think channeling people down a narrative route with, a nice theme and a couple of cool rules is fine. I think it's just basically gone too far. I think it's if the Legendary Legions were dialed back in, I think order would be restored. Really, I think yeah, and I worry a bit with kind of a pivot towards more Legendary Legions and less sort of vanilla lists. So what does that mean? Because I think taking a vanilla list and allying it with something to create your own theme and kind of constructing your army however you want is part of the charm, really. And I know there's always going to be ways that are better than other ways of doing it, but I think it sort of works quite well overall. So I suppose you can talk about warband sizes or whether you need warbands at all. I think overall it works all right how it is. I think it just needs rebalancing and the Legendary Legions toning down a bit, and I don't want to be kind of more pigeonholed into this is a scene from the film, so your army sort of has to reflect that, and that's the only way of building it. I think it's I don't know. I think as sort of more information comes out, I think it will sort of all be a bit clearer. But if it was just a case of that you can still take your vanilla stuff, and we're going to include options for building themey lists, then that's fine, because that's similar to what we have now. But it's just I don't know, it's sort of too early to tell, but it's hopefully not going to pigeonhole too much, but we'll see.
I'm desperate to reply to what you've said, because you've said some really interesting things there, but
Okay.
I go on, let's go to Ash.
Before you forget. I think the problem with some of the Legendary Legions is they're so far apart from each other in terms of the meta, if you like. And I think the best fix would have just been bring out better army rules for picking a Mordor army, say, or picking a Rohan army, where you can have those more vanilla lists, because there's more benefits to having those army rules and picking that army, and maybe not so constrained on sort of the Legendary Legion list. I think obviously I only ever play Legendary Legion, so I can't really comment against not them, because my two armies are Legendary Legion focused, because I like that themey side of having that there, but I think being restricted to just having that themey side, I can imagine the game would get quite stale, like you've said before, Sonny, that you feel like it's that now. I think it'd get stale pretty quick, because you probably would just see 80% of the time a certain army would be brought to a tournament because it's the best. A bit like how we did, I guess, when you look at what's it called? The Legendary Legion that was the meta before everyone took it, with the spiders and everything.
Salt and Lothlorien.
Yeah,
Salt and Lothlorien, where everyone sort of generally took that, and now we're seeing people have gone away from that, and a lot of people are taking the Suladan Witch King sort of alliance. So I think restricting it too much with Legendary Legions is a bit too far. But I think it would be nice to see better army rules and more army rules for, say, taking Rohan, to add that theme into the main Rohan section and not just segregate off, like James said. If you want an all cavalry list, you have to go with Riders of Theoden mainly, because the other ones don't really have that good rules. But if you want to,
doesn't it, basically?
Yeah.
But if you want to have a mix of Rohan, then you've just got to go with a vanilla Rohan, which to me doesn't really give you much benefit for playing Rohan versus the benefit of going for a Mordor army.
Like, I've seen a few people be like, "Oh, let's not worry too much. Let's not be too doomsday on it." And yeah, there does have to be a limit on it, because, like James said, there's a lot of information to come, and things could play out very differently to how we feel. But I do think that the article hasn't been particularly helpful in alleviating people's worries. I do almost feel like it sort of said, you lot have been doing narrative wrong, and we don't like it. We don't like your narrative. And I do think this game, for, what is it, 23 years it's been going? I do think for a lot of people, there's been the opportunity to do what ifs. What if this happened? What if so-and-so met so-and-so? What if Boromir had survived Amon Hen, for instance. These are scenarios that many of us have played. And like, I find it confusing, this statement of we want things to fulfill more of a narrative. And it's like, okay, then let's look at some of the narrative you've released in terms of your Legendary Legions. Do you remember when Aragon got blown up by the bomb at Helm's Deep? Or when Theoden was telling everybody not to get in a shield wall because they were getting shot to pieces by ballistas? Like, that's the Assault on Helm's Deep Legion never sees any berserkers, for instance. I don't really think the chat matches up with what they've released at times. And many of the Legendary Legions we've seen, like, they've specifically said, let's take it back to the films, more or less. But how come loads of the really powerful Legendary Legions we've seen have nothing to do with the films? It's content that's mentioned in the appendices or elsewhere, and now apparently we need to step away from our what-ifs. And we've got Legendary Legions like Men of the West, which should be capturing some of the biggest moments of the book and film. And like, Men of the West is pants, and it's one of the like pivotal moments of the story.
It's not even pants, but you just can't actually physically fit everything in that you want.
Yeah.
So by the time you've got Aragorn and one other hitter, it's like 200. Sorry, not 200, 400 points. So it's like it doesn't work for that reason, just 'cause it's so hero heavy, and you kind of, I feel like it doesn't really capture the flavor just because you need so many points. But yeah, I know what you mean. I think it's I assume what they're sort of trying to say is that they want things to obviously have more of a narrative and sort of stop sort of meta cheese a bit more. But then I'm a bit cautious about forcing people to play in a particular way. Like, I think you had the alliance system introduced in this edition to stop the most egregious lists, like dropping a shade in with Corsairs or something stupid. And that's fine. And to my mind, that's pushing it in a more narrative way, where look, you can have these stupid lists, but it's actually better to do something that actually makes sense in terms of the lore. And I think it's sort of undermined in a way when you have the Legendary Legions, which some of them, I think all of them capture things that did happen, but like you say, a lot of them were in the books. But then putting that to one side,
I don't actually, just as an insert, I don't actually personally have a problem with that. I'm just going on what they said.
No, I don't either. Like, so the article says it wants to bring it back to the films, and I think it's correct to point out that a lot of Legendary Legions at the moment aren't in the films. Nothing of Angmar is in the film, for example. But I'm sort of the more Legendary Legions sort of depicting different periods of time, the better, to my mind. Like, a nice Last Alliance Legendary Legion would, well, actually that was in the film, wasn't it? Bad example. But you take my point. That I'd be happy for more, more. But I think on the flip side, it also has to be acknowledged that a lot of the Legendary Legions that are based in the film, so Vanquishers of the Necromancer, and Rangers of Mirkwood, and I'm sure there's a couple of others. Assault on Helm's Deep. They're actually the most egregious lists in a way, because Rangers of Mirkwood is kind of horrific to play against if you just get kited the whole game. It's awful. Like, the 33% bow limit is a good rule and should be discarded at your peril, basically, in terms of the game. And Vanquishers, I played them before they got nerfed, and it was awful. It was just, I had just no agency over anything. It was just kind of stuff was happening to me, and I was like, okay, great. And then what was the other one I said? I can't even remember now. Assault on Helm's Deep. Yeah, I inflicted that on you, Sonny. It wasn't fun, was it, for you? I mean, it's fun for me because I was having a great time with my ballista. But
yeah, I think that is a good example.
I had you as well, Ash.
That is
and me. I got subject to it 3 times in the same tournament. So.
Only one of those was my fault, though.
That's a really good example, actually. Yeah, because I like playing against you, James. I consider you a friend. And that was one of the worst games I've ever played. And it was entirely down to the army matchup.
Yeah, it was because I mean, at the end of the day, it's very not fun to play against, basically. And I brought it because it was a GBHL 100, and against some people I felt fine playing it. In
You're
that, like,
getting
you're
what
a
you
competitive
deserve.
player, I'm a competitive player. You've
Yeah.
you've got this meta. I've brought that meta. Fine. When I played Ash, I was kind of like,
It's like
I'm just hitting you with ballistic. It's like punching a child or something.
kicking a golden retriever.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And then against you as well, it was a bit. It was a bit like, if you come out behind that rock, I'm just going to shoot you. And then
Yeah, I was very much like, I have initially made a mistake, and I don't see a way out of this.
yeah, but then how are you supposed to? Yeah, well,
I should have just charged against you and hoped the dice gods were kind.
Yeah, I think that was it really. But but I mean, I suppose the point is there's a lot of egregious things which are directly from the films. So that an issue more with how Legendary Legions are executed rather than the players not playing in the sort of correct way. I don't know.
Sorry, Ash, we will hand over to you in a second. I think it is very out of touch to basically say, yeah, we wrote the rules, we wrote all the latest releases for the last 6 years, but you guys are playing it wrong. That's how it came across to me. It's like, you're the game master, you're the dungeon master, you're deciding how this party goes down. Write the rules differently. Don't be like, oh yeah, all these fun ideas and all these armies you've got, can't use them anymore, mate, because I wrote the rules wrong and I'm not man enough to hold my hands up to that. That is being really critical, but maybe it was a poor choice of words, and I could completely be proven wrong on that, and hopefully I am. But it really did rub me up the wrong way. I didn't like it, because like you say, they have written some horrible play experience armies, and none of them are red alliances. And let's say
they're all Legendary Legion. Nothing vanilla is that egregious, really. You get some vanilla stuff, which is a bit more of a pain in the bum, but it's the Legendary Legion where it's whole Lothlorians and the Vanquishers. You're just like, oh my god.
And I'm obviously at the moment a Witch King Suladan player, and I'm pretty sure that with the black, specifically with the Black Numenorians, I am 100% sure that list is getting nuked in the new edition. I'll be surprised if Black Numenorians exist at all.
Yeah, it might be legacy.
Yeah. But let's look at it objectively. From thematic, Suladan and the Witch King were both at the Pelennor.
Yeah, I was about to say, technically that pairing did happen.
Yeah, it's really actually narrative.
Make it a Legendary Legion.
We know the Corsairs who had Black Numenorians at their cities were at the Pelennor. It's really thematic. It's just not something that we saw on the screen. But equally, I don't think I've ever heard somebody say, "Oh, Witch King Suladan, it was unplayable. I had no agency." You can you can fight against it. You can outplay it.
It's tough, and there's a reason a lot of people take it because it's tough, but it's not unbeatable. And I think that's why everyone sort of a year ago was getting very animated about Suladan's banner. Changing to only affect Serpent Horde or something. But I mean, it was never sort of over the top. It's just it's good.
Good
and then
value.
there's stuff that can still basically come in and slap it. Because I think I beat it with the Dragon Emperor. So the trick is to just bring something more egregious, and then
yeah. I mean, I don't know where I rank up in GBHL 100 players because I don't really attend those events, but I think outside of them I'm doing all right. My placings have been fairly consistent, but I'm certainly not going unbeaten with it. It's there's plenty of people that have outplayed me, is his name Ashley Woolager? He plays it a lot. He's not going unbeaten, and he's a much better player than me. Sorry, Ash, let's let you talk. I know you're the quiet one.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I was just thinking that it's very against what they've done with 40k, where they've basically said paint your Space Marines whatever colour you want, and you can play whichever faction you want out of the Space Marines. Now it's like, okay, no, you've got to play this Legendary Legion because this is how it was played in the film, and you can't create your own style of lists to play how you want to. You've got to play it the way we're telling you. It seems very against that narrative in the other game that they bring out, and I think also how many Legendary Legions are they going to bring out with this new film? There's not. Surely there's not going to be that many.
Let's hold off on that.
But yeah,
I think
just
you're right.
think
Though there's a trend, isn't there? I think it's the same in video games as well. Is there's a lot more like, look, play how you want to play it, and it's the same with 40k. When I used to play it a while ago, I had Cadian Imperial Guard, and you could only pick particular rules. You couldn't pick like Mordian or whatever because you were Cadian. Whereas as editions moved on, it was just like, look, you can choose from these doctrines, and you can sort of create a list to suit your play style, and you can kind of just do what you want. We're just sort of here providing the rules. It kind of seems like a step against the trend, actually, sort of swimming upstream with this whole sort of actually we want things to be played in a particular way. But again, I suppose it's not actually clear that they're doing that. It could be just that, I don't know, they're reworking how Legendary Legion is going to work or whatever. But if they did make it more restrictive, it's certainly bucking a trend.
If you look at Gondor as well, they've got 2 Legendary Legions, Men of the West and the Rangers list, but they haven't got one that fits into like when the main part of when we see Gondor, and that's Minas Tirith. If you play a Minas Tirith list to go with the theme of the film, you haven't got a Legendary Legion to do that.
So to bring it back to, because I do think the big positive from this is opportunity. I do think that is something that the new edition, let's assume they do the Legendary Legions well. Let's just assume that for a minute. To go back to all these armies which don't have Legendary Legions and give them one. Like, if they don't get Legacied, Khazad-dûm, for instance, desperately needs something to make that more competitive. Minas Tirith, like you say, there just doesn't seem to be like a legion that supports having hordes of Minas Tirith warriors working in shield walls like they do in the films. And I'm sure there's those are just the ones that are in my mind, but I'm sure there's loads of other armies that desperately need this boost that a Legendary Legion could potentially give them.
Yeah, I think that is a positive that could come out of this. Because if you think of the situations you've got, like going back to the Gondor theme, you've got when they're at Minas Tirith, you've got the Battle of Osgiliath.
I mean, there's got to be a better way of running Warriors of Minas Tirith that doesn't include bringing 2 machine guns with you.
Yeah.
Sorry, James. What were you going to say a second ago?
I was just thinking the Khazad-dûm's prime example, because I think towards the beginning of the edition, vanilla Khazad-dûm could sort of hold its own, whereas now it just kind of, it was never sort of top tier, you could say. But I think before a lot of the supplements came out, you could bring a vanilla Khazad-dûm and expect to do reasonably. Whereas I think if you brought Khazad-dûm to, to a sort of GBHL 90 even now, I think unless you're a good player, I think you're unlikely to come right at the top. Like, a good player could still take it and do well with it.
I mean, there's exceptional players like Alistair King. Like, I think at that top level, he likes bringing unusual lists and proving them successful. But let's exclude the top 30 GBHL players. Out of them, I agree with you. Like, you're just not going to see it on the podium unless you've had all the luck in the world.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
And I think that range is a really good range, that it does actually have things that you could come up with unique rules to
so much
to fix them. Like Rangers, for instance. I don't know. Like, let them have a Ranger captain who's got March. Let the Rangers move 6 inches and find it easy across difficult terrain. Like, there's models in that range that you could use to tweak without fundamentally taking away the idea of the dwarves being heavy infantry.
Yeah. If it gets Legacy, it'll be really sad.
I think they're probably going to get Legacy, though, because
I don't know.
They're not in the films.
Is that just the deepest fear we all have in our hearts, or is that something that's likely to happen, though?
A bit like your Leviathan Dreadnought.
Shush. I'm a narrative player in 40k. I play what I want, mate.
I think that's I think it's just one of those things where when stuff is basically, because I didn't want to sort of rip on Games Workshop too much, because like overall new edition, net positive, great opportunities, blah blah blah. But I think the thing that's a bit frustrating now, which I guess people listening to this in sort of 2 or 3 weeks' time might not matter so much, it might be revealed. But when you sort of say, "Oh, we're going to cut a bunch of stuff from the range, and we're going to change army lists, and we're going to do this," it's just a bit like it is sort of dropping bombshells, because if you're saying, "Oh, we're going to legacy some stuff," and it's just like, "Oh, well, are you getting rid of Corsair Reavers and Murin and Dra and a couple of other sort of fairly pointless things, or are you retiring the fiefdoms list?" So it's like, do you know what I mean? It's just
I entirely.
We're going to retire Arnor.
Like, like that would be brutal.
What a Chad move.
Well, I think I suspect Gullivar is going. But
yeah, exactly. So I've wanted one for a couple of years now, but I'm not buying him because I'm like, well, I don't really. Cause I do play narrative, but I don't play narrative with Angmar. So...
Yeah, it's like you mentioned. It's like you mentioned Murin and Dra. Like, I bought them in the made to order. I wanted those models since I was a kid. I thought they were really cool. If they get taken out of the game, I'm not too upset. I can play them as dwarf captains at home.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Like, I thought the models were cool. They've never really been relevant to the main game. But yeah, if you take out Khazad-dûm and somebody's got 1,000 points of Khazad-dûm, that's pretty devastating to them. And
I mean, that's me, because I've got a shelf of Khazad-dûm, which I've painted up the Iron Guard for that mini madness. But other than that, they're waiting to be painted, and if they get retired, it's a bit like, well.
In these shelves up there, I've got my childhood collection of dwarves that I've kept saying to myself, I'll get round to it, but I'm like, they're not very good. I'll get round to it, but they're not very good, and I will be.
If they get legacy, you're not getting around.
Yeah, I'm going to be really upset if I've never got the chance to play them at a tournament because I've been too greedy.
Yeah, well, and I think this is the thing: is people saying, well, actually, it's up to the TO. They can do legacy lists if they want. And like Old World, I think they got a bunch of stuff that was legacied, and I don't. I've only played a couple of games of Old World, and I don't do it for tournaments or anything. But I think a lot of TOs just like, nah, bring what you want. If it's on the legacy list or whatever it's called, then whatever. But
I do. Old World, I think, is such like the big fans and the TOs of that. They are like the long beards of the wargaming community, though. They're the people that were like, up yours, Games Workshop. Sigmar, what? I'm going to keep going.
Yeah,
we've been here since the 1980s. We ain't going anywhere.
There's fewer people like that in this community, though. I think there's a couple of like the old guard who have sort of been around forever. But I think us
in our 30s that were teenagers or slightly younger than the Lord of the Rings movie, I think we're the majority of the actual old guard in this game. Is why those
the old
it's sad but true. Yeah, we have to go to a different game system if we want to be considered young, James. And that game system is old. Well,
that's why I do that.
I guess we're going to be governed by what the GBHL decide as well, aren't we?
Will,
you can allow legacies.
They'll leave that up to TOs, I think. It's like the CD Prince, they've kind of washed their hands of it and left it up to TOs, so I think they'll probably do the same.
Which I think is just going to be like, I think likely, maybe if the rules aren't out there, legacy stuff is allowed for a while, and then I think when releases start coming out, I just can't see it, because it's not getting FEQ'd, it's not going to. It can't stay forever.
A lot of broken models.
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking. Is if there's something in legacy that's broken, and then people just bring it because it's broken, and then people are like, oh well, it's not even actually tournament legal, and it just kind of creates headaches unnecessarily. So, but again, it won't be a problem if they like retire a few models that nobody cares about. Like they stuff that they never released models for or whatever, or if a couple of the old sort of rubbish stuff, but keep almost everything, then that's fine. But if they clear out whole armies, then it's going to be a problem.
If they get rid of Khazad-dûm, there's going to be loads of and I said this in the blog post I did for the episode. Because I was going on holiday, I didn't have time. I did a quick blog post to sort of get down my ideas. I do think like the kind of people that turn up with Khazad-dûm army, like, they are pillars of the community generally. They're like people that are really fun to play against. They're people that really love the lore. Like, going into the mines of Moria is a central part of the story. Like, and in The Hobbit, sort of the feeling of the dwarves and what they're like, it's really central to what Lord of the Rings is. And I know they don't make it to the big screen, but I just think it would be tragic if they're.
I know you hate it, Sonny, but I think dwarves play a big part of Rings of Power as well.
I don't know what you're talking about.
And it's a very it's a very narrative behind Lord of the Rings, isn't it? To have men, dwarves, elves, orcs. To take a majority of the dwarves away would be a shame.
That bit, yeah. I mean, the idea of the bigotry between the elves and the dwarves and the Hobbit, and then the coming together of Legolas and Gimli as lifelong friends, that's undeniable. Was like one of the big themes of the story. And yeah, I think it would be a shame if we lost them as a faction. I think they're beautiful models as well that hold up.
Yeah, they're really old, but like especially like the Khazad Guard is still good, and I think even the Plastic Warriors, like they're really old, but they still look pretty good.
They're not. I've got, because I bought a lot of the metal ones when I was a kid. They're not quite as good as the metal ones, but yeah, they're a hell of a lot better than say like Harridan Warriors, where it's like, is this a hand or a cloak?
Yeah, no, I think they hold up. So that's another thing, though. Do you think they'll retire anything that is in plastic?
Oof. Yeah, because obviously Dwarf Warriors are in plastic.
I
think they like keeping the plastic molds. Although the thing is, if they're coming, I don't know how much you know about like injection molding, James, but like the molds have a shelf life. Like they can only produce so many. So if some of those molds are coming towards the end, are they going to pay the 30 grand for a refresh? Because you've basically got to buy a whole new one, haven't you, Ash?
Yeah, and it's probably a bit more. I don't know how big they're going to be, but yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot of investment up front. And I think, if they've got new shiny models out, are people going to still be buying?
So I don't think it's impossible. I do think they love like reusing, because they probably can use the tooling to make new molds. There will probably be some sort of net saving.
The tooling they'll use just the standard injection mold tools, and they'll just put the sort of the mold in the tool.
So I mean like the master mold to create the injection mold. They will have a master somewhere.
Probably not, because they're just machined out of like mainly like aluminium. So
I don't know. I think we're getting too much into it. We're both engineers dragging ourselves into an engineering conversation.
They'll have the design, and they'll just get a new tool cut probably in China. So
I don't think
the tool wears out, they'll probably.
I don't think they cut them.
We talk about town planning, so I can.
I don't think they cut them. I don't think it's high enough detail. But we're getting into another area. But yeah, I do think there would be some sort of net saving. But to go back to the original thing, I don't think it's impossible for them to step away from plastic.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't done it yet in Lord of the Rings, but they have. I mean, look at
they do it in 40k all the time.
Battle and 40k, they sort of bin them off, like you say, all the time. But I don't know. That's the thing that makes me nervous. Is why just sort of say, oh, we're going to get rid of a bunch of stuff, and then just let that hang.
It's against their convention that they've done in other games as well. Like recently, Age of Sigmar did have I'm not a fan of Age of Sigmar. I'm not involved in it at all. But from what I read and saw, they did an appalling cull of like models that had only been out for like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, because I think the Stormcast, didn't they basically redo that whole faction? I don't know, because I don't play it either.
But what they did was they said they didn't do any of this pre-announcement. They just said a cull is here. These models are leaving. Buy them while we've got them, because we're not making more. Done. And I think that it would have been a lot better if they had done that with this. But I suspect that some of the re-released models from Rise of Angmar are in the cut, or at least some of Orc Trackers. They're in one of the Legendary Legions. I bet they're getting cut. I think Gulliver is probably getting cut. I wouldn't be surprised if models like the Shade get cut. Even though they've just brought it back.
There's a lot
that's the worry, isn't
it? Has gone online only on the website recently.
I think all the pre-orders, actually no, about half the pre-orders are online only, aren't they? But I don't know what that means, because does that mean they're not a Warhammer World? Because Warhammer World has everything, but
They've
then
in the store, because I've got one here in Coventry, they barely ever stock Lord of the Rings anyway.
yeah, exactly, they don't stock it anyway, and that friendly local gaming stores just tend to have plastics. So
which I
yeah.
think. So let's move on slightly, and we'll just talk generally
You haven't
about.
talked about the intelligence characteristic though.
Oh, do we have to? I'm not. I don't really care. There's an intelligence characteristic, everyone. It's going to be used for seeing the ring bearer. Okay.
And maybe a couple of other things like objectives.
Okay, yeah, we'll talk about whether it. Yeah, if they used it sort of, I can't remember what they call it in 40k, but every model has like a value, and you can use it on objectives. Or if they used it, I saw like maybe if two people call heroic moves.
Yeah, it could help decide who goes first. I don't mind it. I think it was a bit weird because I was like, oh, it's been 25 years. No, not 25. How long's it been? Like 20, I guess, since it first came out, and the stats have never changed, and now they're changing. But could be good. But
I have heard something which I've had confirmed from a couple of sources. So I'm actually like
off the press.
Friends in high places.
No, just trawling too much of the internet and talking to a couple of people. And apparently the original source for this does come from Games Workshop. So, but take it. All rumours are lies until proven otherwise. But I actually am leaning on this is definitely happening. When you roll for initiative, you choose whether you go first or second if you win it.
No, that's I've heard that as well. That seems like a good thing, especially with Maelstrom, which I've assumed they're changing to be warband by warband. Alternating warbands, not like let's deploy your entire army and then I'm going to move on behind you.
I think let's just throw Maelstrom entirely in the bin.
I don't mind it. It's just so poorly executed. I think if it alternated, I think it's just a totally different game. I was going to home rule it in one of my tournaments, and then I kept forgetting to add it to the rules pack. But
I don't hate it as much if you just get rid of if Khan chariots can't charge first turn, if dwarf chariots can't charge first turn, I don't have a problem with it. But I just feel like they completely break it. When I played Khan at a tournament, and it was like, okay, so I can't compel you into a combat with me with my magic, but you can come on and just run me over. Like that doesn't make any sense.
I guess it's because they're not charging, is it? It's because they're just ramming through you.
Get rid of that janky phrasing. Like it's nonsense.
Yeah. Also, it's a bit odd they don't have to take courage tests, because it's a bit like, oh, I'm not charging you, but I am just running you over. It's just like, well, you're still going near. You're still sort of moving towards it.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, it's a big scary troll. I'm going to drive towards it, but I'm safe in my little car.
yeah, for sure.
And might be legacy anyway, because...
No, stop it. I've got some canned. I literally just bought these. Yeah.
There was another podcast. Like, I don't have any canned models, so I haven't got a horse in that race. But I heard another podcast be like, oh, well, if you've just got canned models and that's all you play, and you only play things like that and Harad, how much of a fan of Lord of the Rings are you? Aren't you just more of a strategy battle fan? And I was like, what? I've never heard anything so like...
But Ash only has Rohan. He likes Rohan. Leave him alone.
It's just so tunnel vision on
more money on Grey Shame.
I just thought it was so tunnel vision on your own view of how you play the game and how you're a fan of it. Like,
look, I've got tons of armies, and I sort of mix it up all the time. I tend not to take the same thing too much, but that's me, and I've spent stupid money on the game. Whereas some people will be like, oh, I'll have an army. Maybe I'll have two armies, and then. Doesn't mean that you're not a fan or that your sort of view is worth any less than. It's just a bit of like elitism. I think it's just a bit unnecessary.
Yeah, I do really like that. The thing about war games is it takes all types and it takes all comers, and I really do like the open nature of mini games. Like I think, like Ash mentioned, it is one of the great things they've done in 40k is basically say for Space Marines, do your models how you want and then choose the rules you want to reflect them. And it's the best thing they've done in years. So people just have like an absolutely carte blanche to invent their own story. And I do think that this game tends to attract men mostly. That for myself, like, I'm not a particularly like artistic or creative guy outside of my work. And this is something that really sort of satisfies that creative drive in many ways, and I think that's true for a lot of people. And I just would really hate with the Legendary Legion thing if it becomes like, we're telling you how to do your fun. And I think it's a cop out to be like, well, TOs can do what they want. Like, no, we want a supported game. That,
I mean, technically, you can do what you want now. You can just sort of say, "Oh, we're going to just ignore half the rules," and because it's my tournament. But it's just like nobody does, because you need a sort of common rule set that everyone plays to. I think as soon as you start chopping and changing, and like even just legacy or not to legacy, that's still people are still going to have opinions about that, and it's still going to affect the scene, isn't it? So
I mean, yeah, we've all got opinions on this game. That other people think are jank and rubbish. But the difference is we're not stopping anybody else doing what they want. And that is the problem when the main body potentially says we're going to stop you from doing what you want. Maybe it doesn't go that hard, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, we still don't know what we don't know, do we? So we don't know how much they're going to push us down a certain way of playing.
I mean, it at the moment, there is already a separation. We have a matched play guide. I can't imagine narrative players are picking up the matched play guide and be like, let's do that time Aragon stormed to the camp. Like, they're playing scenarios. We don't need the matched play to be, like you mentioned earlier, James, like snippets of the film. We have scenarios for that, and scenarios are really fun. And we don't need them to be terribly balanced as well, because that's not why you're playing them. They're the sort of games you can have a couple of beers and it doesn't really matter. Whereas if you did that with a match play game, it may well cost you the game and maybe you don't feel great about it. But like, if I'm doing the Breaking of the Fellowship, which is a scenario we've played, isn't it, Ash? I don't really care if I make a mistake and I lose. That's not why I'm playing it.
Half the time you're playing both sides a little bit anyway in narrative, because you're helping your opponent or saying, okay, well, I'm going to go and do this because like it's cool, or because they did it in the film or whatever. And
yeah, people play the narrative, don't they, so they can have that like immersiveness from the film.
Yeah.
So I can understand that. Well, that if you want that immersiveness, go play a narrative. If you want to have a match play, that's like saying, okay, in 40k, you've got to always have Space Marines versus someone else. You can't have Space Marines on like Blood Angels versus Dark Angels in a tournament, because that's not how the film was.
I almost forgot that we needed to cover it. The big tie-in, War of the Rohirrim, which is
positive news.
I don't know. Which is an anime film. I don't really follow anime, but from what I've read, the director doing it, he has his own particular art style. He knows what he's doing in terms of animation. It does sound like Peter Jackson is only attached to it in name only. Although I forget her second name, but there is Philippa, who was one of the writers from Lord of the Rings. Is involved with it, I think, with her daughter and another novice writer. I think in terms of the quality of the film and how that pans out, we're going to have to wait until the film comes out. So much. We've seen plenty of films that come out with a banging trailer and then they're not any good, and ones that have had underwhelming ones. So we'll leave that to the film critics.
Why'd it have to be anime?
Yeah, I would have preferred to have seen them remake another book and not just create this narrative that is part of a book.
Well, they're doing The Search for Gollum. That's being filmed at the moment with Andy Serkis, which is going to be live action. And who knows, that may make us hate live action. So
it's a bit like... It's a bit unnecessary, isn't it? It's like I'm happy and it'll be good, but it's a bit like nobody was asking for it. I think if they redid if they did something on the Silmarillions and the first age, that would be absolutely sick. But I mean, Hunt for Gollum, I'm sure it's fine. There's it's an interesting part of the book, and a bunch of stuff happens. But it's I don't know. Like it could, yeah. I mean, it could work, but nobody was asking for it, were they?
I did a little bit of research on this, and hopefully it doesn't impact the quality of the film. But it's all like quite out in the open. I can't remember whoever has the film rights. Is it Warner Brothers or something? Yeah.
Yeah.
So they actually put in their share thing during COVID that they were rushing forward with the idea of an anime film because they needed to have a theatrical release by the end of 2024 to retain the movie rights. And this has been, like I say, I will leave it to the movie critics to decide the ins and outs of it. But this film apparently is on an accelerated cycle. It has been fast-tracked. And the only reason that is coming out right now is because they were going to lose the theatrical movie rights to it otherwise.
Well, the director is quite well regarded in anime circle. I mean, I don't like or care about anime.
Same.
So I don't know, but
I've seen some of the art released for the film, and it looks like, anime aside, it looks like from a hobby point of view, we're going to get some hopefully some new models.
Yeah.
It sounds like Gondor and what's it called? Dunharrow are going to bring us some new models because they come and help Helm.
Yeah, let's focus on.
There's a picture here. I've got a picture on my screen from the film of a Mummock smashing through a Rohan wall.
Yeah, the trailer.
So it looks like Mummocks are going to be involved in there.
Yeah, I can say for sure. Like, let's try and step away from the movie because we could easily do our own podcast on that and upset a whole other group of people. But it's
upset one group at a time.
Yeah. We're just stick to strategy battle fans at the moment. But I think it's more or less confirmed that Harad, Easterlings, Dunland, Rohan. I haven't heard about Gondor, but they're all going to be heavily involved. And the big rumour is that it's going to be Rohan versus Dunland for the box.
It's got to be, hasn't it? New plastic.
Yeah. I think it's the best opportunity. Like, let's say the movie is terrible. I reckon we'll still get some decent looking models. And
But if the movie sucks, whatever.
I mean, The Hobbit sucked, and it didn't stop us getting models.
Well, exactly. Yeah. I mean. Yeah, and if the movie sucks, whatever. But it's an interesting time in the lore, and if we get cool models that from sort of factions that are kind of pretty well loved, then yeah, sure, why not? That's good news. To my mind.
In terms of heroes, I think there should. I forget his name. Is it Frenlauf or something like that? He is the 10th king of Gondor and the guy that saves the day at the end. So we should get a model for him. We should get a model for each of Helmhammer's sons. There's been a movie, at least in terms of her story and name, has been invented, but she was just called Helmhammer's daughter in the appendices. Hera, she's going to be a central character, so we should get a model for her. I imagine we get a new Helmhammer.
I don't want a new one. I like mine.
We'll get
you can still use that, James, though.
As long as it's still legal, that's fine.
We Freolaf as well, who is
that's
who
him.
Starts the second line of kings, which is basically the nephew of Helm.
Yeah, that's the name. The 10th king of Gondor. He's the one that liberates
Rohan.
Edoras. Rohan. Sorry, yeah. Getting muddled up. He's the 10th king of Rohan who liberates Edoras. So we should get a model for him. We should get a model for Wolf, who is the Dunlending crown prince who then becomes the king and leads the whole thing. Should get a model for his father, I imagine. And then supporting cast,
We possibly could get a new Saruman model, because I think...
Yeah,
Saruman is in it as well.
They've got a plastic Saruman though, so I'm not sure what. But they might, I suppose.
I'm confused how he fits in though, because it sounded like, because I reread the appendices quickly, and it sounds like he just turns up at the end and he's like, "Yeah, this has been pretty bad. Maybe you should let me live in Orthanc, and I can make sure this sort of thing doesn't happen again."
Yeah.
And we all know how that pans
models. It says here that. If this is part of the film when Helmhammer goes to Hornburg or Helm's Deep.
Yeah, he goes there and goes on a bit
renamed.
of a mad one, I think.
That Gondor and Dunharrow come and help, so we could get a Dunharrow theme list of not being dead Dunharrow, but actually the people who are alive.
I have heard well, it was in an article I sent to you guys from Screen Rant that there may be a tribe of all female warriors that turn up. I don't know whether that's true or just wish listing from. It was quite a slanted article, but I haven't seen that anywhere else. But apparently there have been preview screenings, but I don't know where that would fit in. But we'll have to see. But yeah, on the whole, it does sound like there's going to be quite a host of different factions and characters coming into it.
Yeah, and like I said, if hopefully the movie will be good and it'll kind of change opinions on anime. And if it's rubbish, then we get a bunch of models that fit nicely in with the lore, and there's new releases. So it's all
for
good.
me, I don't really, if the film's not a 10 out of 10 for me, like you say, I'm not a fan of anime, so maybe it's not really made for me. But I just hope there's like a core story and a bit of feeling behind the characters, so that when so I can be like, oh yeah, I really like that guy, or I really like her. I want those models. I want to represent them in my stories. A bit of meat behind the profile. That would be nice. Although we don't always need that, because there's plenty of models I have in my cabinet that aren't film models, and I've
but they're all going to be legacy.
yeah. But I do, on the whole, I think it's that. Do you think they would really do plastic Dunlendings though, being as that's not an old range?
Well, because you can't have the starter sets are all plastic, so I don't see how you could have a Dunlending Rohan starter set without it. You think that they'd probably are they going to redo Rohan? Probably not, but they might do plastic Royal Guard, and then you might have plastic Dunlending Warriors, and then obviously the horses of Forge World. Because I think the current set of Dunlendings is metal, and I think they've replaced. Well, they have. I know they have. They've replaced metal with plastic before. I mean, like Dwarf Warriors, Mordor Orcs. I know there's more recent examples. So I don't think that's impossible. And obviously, metal's getting increasingly expensive to use as a material, isn't it? So I don't think it's impossible. But
there was a bit of a leading question from me, because I entirely agree with you. I would lose my mind, to be honest, as like an old school fan of the movies. If they came out with plastic Rohirrim across the board, I would just buy all of that in a heartbeat. Like new Riders of Rohan, new Royal Guard.
No, they're not allowed to, because I've just painted up like a bajillion. Like I have 36 Riders of Rohan
Sounds like
and 15 Royal Guard, so I'm like, I don't want to buy all that again.
Corsairs are gonna maybe appear as well in the film.
I'm wondering how this all affects, the existing ones, because it sounds like they really want to stick close to film depicted IP. That's the big rumor that I was going to mention this. It sounds like to me, like having listened to a lot of the coverage and stuff, that I heavily suspect at this point that there was a member of the GW team at Ardcon off the books. They didn't appear on any social media. Just some things that other content creators have said that were in attendance. They're very, very common, and it all refers to having spoken to somebody. I don't know who that somebody is, but they all seem to have a common narrative, and then sort of catch themselves and be like, but this is all rumour. And yeah, it sounds like they want to stick to film IP as close as possible. As I say, all rumours are lies until proven otherwise, but
I follow a guy on Instagram who hinted a similar thing. And he worked for GW, and he's worked on this project. So
is he going to get the sack soon then?
it would seem stupid not to follow the narrative.
I know, but it's just that they're
a multi-million-pound company. Are they going to waste money bringing out new models when they've already got models?
But think about it. Think about half the range isn't coherent. Or coherent's the wrong word. Isn't represented in the films. It's a lot of models to replace, and a lot of them are really popular.
Yeah, I like what they've done at the moment, where they've use the films, like what's in the films is film accurate in terms of costume and design of the model, whatever. Then they've used that as a jumping off point to do some other stuff. So I think Easterlings is a great example. Like whether or not you like the Dragon Emperor as Legendary Legion or whatever, there's a few Easterlings in the film, and they've made this whole faction with like a really rich sort of range of models and history. And like they invented Rutabi, but she fits perfectly. I think that's really cool, and I don't know if it's part of. I don't know how these things work, so I'm just sort of talking nonsense as normal. But I don't know if that's part of the negotiations for continuing the game system. Is that actually, before the films are like Hobbits, 10 years old, Lord of the Rings 20 years old. They're a bit like a bit indifferent to it, but now there's new stuff coming out. They're a bit like, no, you have to stick close to our IP if you want to use this for your game. I don't know.
Yeah, you've got to think if they're allowing them to use the branding from the film, they are going to be saying, look, if you're going to have things from the film, I want them to look like they are in my film. Because like I say, I did do a little bit of research on this stuff because it is really hard to find out how the IP stuff is announced. And I found from like 2016, I think it was, when the license was that may not have been the last time, but it was maybe the time before that they renegotiated it, and they did a joint statement together, and they specifically, the Tolkien people and the film people specifically said that they really enjoyed how Games Workshop represented their brand, the films, and that they did it in a realistic and accurate way. They were happy with the aesthetic, basically. So I think
so. Maybe it's not a license negotiating thing that's pushing the game in a particular way. Then it could just be a choice of the game designers, I suppose.
Yeah, I think up till now, I think that is the case. Obviously, what they've agreed with this new film, we don't know. But yeah, I think it is a bit of an easy get out of jail free card to be like, yeah, I'm cutting all these models because reasons I can't tell you, and I'm just going to leave you to speculate. When it may just be like, all right, we've got all these molds, they're running out. I don't want to really pay for them. I don't want to have to keep ordering white metal. Let's tell people we can't and keep it ambiguous.
I was looking at this because I was interested, and depending on what they make the molds from, you get between 30,000 to 300,000 molds out of it.
Well, that's quite a large spectrum.
So I don't think they get close to their capacity with Lord of the Rings stuff.
I was guessing, just based on, God, this is a boring conversation. Just based on the work I used to do, basically making plastic brackets that were made out of a very similar material. They were about 100,000 pieces, and they cost about 30 grand. But they're doing a higher level of detail. I've never had to design something that's got eyes on it, for instance.
I think the detail is what probably does the shelf life.
Yeah. All right. Have we got time for one more question, or do we want to wrap up, boys?
Oh, I don't mind one more question.
Okay. So the Ash
depends on the question.
It's really personal. We're going to out you. No, it was just that I feel that, particularly with some of the articles, that maybe that sounds like there is a bit of a step back from the competitive game, and that there has been a little bit of shade thrown on it. And I know in the past, we as a group, and particularly like our podcast, we've maybe pointed the fingers at the top tables and said we don't like that. But I do think in Middle-earth strategy battle game that on the whole, the competitive game is a lot closer entwined with gaming groups and what we do at home and the larger community. I think it is very representative of a large part of the people that play this game, and I think that's quite different from like Old World and 40k, where I think the people that play that competitively it's a huge pool, but I think they are a very, very small percentage of that fan base. Whereas I would not be surprised if 40% of the people that play this game are attending one GBHL tournament a year, because we had 1,500 people attend, And I wouldn't be surprised if, the player base is like 4,000 to 5,000 in the UK. Anyway, the reason I feel like we have looked at the top tables before and said, we don't like this, we're not sure about that, is because they are very influential, and a lot of them do also do content creation. And I think that the content creation, the drive towards tournaments, the enthusiasm that the competitive game has created for this game over the last 10 years is the reason that we're getting a new edition. And I just thought I think it's a bit wrong, really. I think that the competitive tournament scene has been incredibly good for Middle-earth strategy battle game, incredibly good for Games Workshop sales. And I just do worry when they're sort of almost throwing a bit of shade on the competitive scene, because it is only like 30 people that follow the travelling circus of GBHL 100s round. The reason our show is popular is because most people are like us. They're going out for a day out and they want to make the most out of it. So there's my pitch. What do you guys think? Who wants to go first?
I'll let James lead with this one.
I was just going to say, broadly agree. Yeah, I think that's. I mean, like most of the people I know who have played have been to a tournament at some point. It may have been 8-9 years ago, or it may have just been once. But I think there's a bunch of people who sort of play at home or play with their kid or something, because it's quite a simple game, and the films are old now, which makes me feel old, but still well liked. But I think I think it's not such a big leap from casual to tournament.
Yeah,
and I think you're right. And I think I do wonder if it's a few people giving everyone a bad name, which sounds way harsher than I mean it to be. But so I know that there's a bunch of GBHL 80s that have tried some sort of theme to sort of keep it light and keep it fun, and it just never works. So I think there's somewhere you can bring a monster or a dragon, or you don't have to obey a certain army list building things, and people will just break it.
Yeah.
Because obviously, sort of change rules at your peril, really, don't you? So when you change a rule and it just has completely unforeseen consequences, and someone brings something just completely busted. And I mean, it's even like mini madness. And this isn't me having a go at anyone. It's just an observation.
We did when we did that tournament report.
I know. Yeah, it was. I think you were a bit
controversial again.
Yeah, it didn't. I don't think it tickled your fancy, but I'm glad you corrected yourself though, because you said I think you said we played Contest of Champions when it was Lords of Battle, but you I was about to drop you a comment, and I finished listening. I was like, oh no, we'll let him off.
I was nice about you, James.
No, you were very.
You're gonna get trolled by James.
Yeah, it's just anyway, my point is that somebody brought the Goblin Scribe, just completely, or was thinking about it. I can't remember, but it just completely breaks. They didn't. It just completely breaks the system. And I mean, it's just the same for all of these things. There's just there's a loophole, and someone's going to exploit it. And I think you can't change people. Yeah. And they sort of. I don't want to say give us a bad name, but certainly, because you look at 90% of people and they're not like that, and and then if they finish near the top, it sort of gives people all the right to all tournament players, and I don't think Lord of the Rings is like that, but I also think
it's not like 40k, is it, where we've got like people going to the World Championship in Vegas and things like that, and people actually win a hefty amount of money if they win tournaments in 40k.
Yeah.
Whereas Lord of the Rings is just like it's. I've always seen it as like a chill game to go to tournaments, and I don't know anyone in my circle of people I play who play 40k tournaments, but everyone I know plays Lord of the Rings tournaments.
I think we are blessed in that. I've had unpleasant games against competitive players, and to be honest, it's not really been their conduct. It's just the list they're playing, and they're very good at them. and that's more of like a rules thing. It's not their fault for taking a competitive army and doing well. I think we are blessed that there is a real small amount of tryhards. Basically, I think it is the phrase. There's a very I remember going to my local gaming club, and there was like a handful of them at that one local gaming club. There's literally like a handful of them across the whole of the UK in this situation. It is very, very
I guess
small.
it's a small pool, isn't it, of players?
Yeah, but it's like, if let's say it was 1,500 odd people went to GBHL tournaments last year. I think it's easy to say it's double that or more. It's probably more than that, but the player pool was double that at least, if that's the competitive player pool.
I guess that could get bigger with a new film.
But yeah, I just thought I thought maybe hopefully for the next article they changed the wording a little bit, because as much as I've said, I don't like this min-maxing on tournament points at the expense of sportsmanship. I do think like the top players and the exposure they give the game, I think they do a really good job, and they do a really good job of encouraging people to come to tournaments. And I mean, it was Entmoot, which is obviously one of the biggest ones. I know he's not like a top table player, but he goes to a lot of top table events. He was what encouraged me to go to my first tournament, because I didn't know anyone that played. I just think they've been really, really good for the game, and it's strange because they're sort of had this association with Ardacon, and then they're being like, we need to take it back to narrative. I found it confusing.
We need a what's his name, Stephen Box in Middle Earth to sort of. I
don't know whether we need some. We've already got Will Champion teaching people how to be good at the game. I'm not sure if we need more.
I mean, more of the sportsmanship side.
Oh, okay.
I think he's a big advocate, isn't he, for bringing sportsmanship into 40k.
I was going to say,
maybe we need something like that.
I'll very quickly get left behind if everybody starts getting blooming lessons. It's hard enough as it is. Sorry, James. I think you were going to say so.
No, I was just going to say, I think, just making sure a bit more carefully worded next article, maybe, and then it won't upset people.
It did feel, I think the last two, it has felt a bit firing from the hip. Maybe not, guessing what the reaction may be. And they really should have known, especially with the legacy stuff. Like, if I was Games Workshop's PR manager right now, I would say, whatever it is, whatever we're doing, I know the wheel was probably already turning on it. We need to announce it as soon as possible.
Yes, it's sort of it's making me quite anxious, just because I have so many armies, and I got a bunch of painted stuff. I got a bunch of unpainted stuff as well. And if there's some stuff I'll keep no matter what for scenario play. But if it's like if it's like Khazad-dûm, for example, like I like it, but I don't really have any desire to play scenarios with them. So it's a bit like, I'd rather know if the whole thing is just pointless.
Yeah.
It's quite a big thing to leave looming.
It does feel a bit limiting. Like I recently bought a load of Isengard stuff because that's what I was going to do next. Whether I do or not, I don't know, because maybe it shifts out the meta. But I bought some Dunland stuff to support that. The Dunland Heroes and the Crebain, and I'm like, ugh. That was.
I assume they're going to be mutually exclusive with the new ones. It'd be like Minas Tirith, where you can't have Aragorn and Boromir.
Yeah, I just hope they're still usable, because they were expensive. That is the big thing that I think that is going to hurt their reputation a lot, is if they start writing off resin Forge World models. I think people are going to have a really low tolerance to them saying, these real expensive models we've been shifting over the last 6 years, they're not in the game anymore.
Again.
Yeah.
The Leviathan Dreadnoughts.
Well, they were plastic kits, to be fair.
Well, but some people bought the Forge Worlds ones, didn't they?
Yeah, but I just think, God, if you've bought a Dunland Forge World army and that gets made redundant, you can't do that. Surely not.
Yeah.
Let's hope they don't increase the base size. make everyone change base
Well, I've got
sizes.
Bjornings. What if they? Well, yeah, hopefully they won't
Bjornings
Primaris dwarves now.
Bjornings aren't in the films, are they? Like I rewatched The Hobbit recently, and he says all his people are dead.
Yeah, I mean, well, the thing is, they're in the lore, so I don't know, because I don't think Bjornings are the same race as Bjorn. I think they're woodsmen who come under the leadership of Beorn, but they are in the books, but they're not sort of these, like, I don't know. Anyway, yeah. So I mean, they're sort of in the books, but yeah, not in the films, and it's a bit like, oh, well, I assume that's not being, legacied. But
I mean, I do see like. Yeah, we'll wrap this up in a second, but I do see that as like the levels of egregious. Like if they're getting rid of Murin and Dra, other fringe characters, everybody's cool with that. If they start getting rid of sort of flavour in some of the armies, like Abrakan Guard, Watchers of Karna, that ain't great, but maybe people can live with it because they can still play their armies. If they get rid of entire armies, like Khaz of Doom, it's getting pretty bad. If they get rid of Forge World models that they've released in the last 6 years, people will not be happy at all. Yeah,
I did want to mention at the start actually that I totally forgot to, but I was going to sort of put a marker down and say that if I complain about it, it's just me complaining, and I don't think it will kill the game. And like no matter what, the game will probably be alive and well this time next year. We just might be annoyed about particular things, but I think if they did like kill a bunch of like Forge World armies, I think it probably would kill the game. Just be like, cool, I dropped like $1,000 on this, and now I can't play it. Bye.
I'm just going to put it out there. Malhir is out of stock.
Is he?
Yeah, Malhir is one of the ones that I've talked about. I mean, obviously, we're pretty big fans of the game. I know your channel's not totally dedicated to Middle-earth, but you do Middle-earth content. You attend tournaments. We have a podcast that's literally got Middle-earth in the podcast title. It would be pretty hard for us to rebrand and pivot.
Might be the death of us.
So we are pretty hardcore fans. But yeah, the reason I sort of did raise concern was because I was a bit like, oh, new edition. Pretty excited about that. And then I saw it and I was like, okay, there's a 1% chance that they kill this for me. And there wasn't a chance before.
I don't think that it's going to kill the game.
It definitely won't.
I think if anything, it's going to maybe inject some life into it in some ways and kill off bits we might like. But
it definitely, there is no chance of it killing the game. It's just like, could it lead to a rotation of players? Could it lead to people being like, well, because there are so many great game systems. We were talking about it in the group chat earlier. There's other things people can play. That's the thing. You don't have to make it, oh, this is the worst thing ever. You just have to make it not as good as some of the other really cool offerings. Like I really like Kill Team. I've really liked the look of the old world. I like 40k. I'd never go competitive with it, but I do like it, and I could easily spend the rest of my life painting the models I've got for that. I think I will be playing Middle-earth this time next year. It's just, how much do I love it? And we all have a lifespan in terms of how long we're going to bother going to tournaments, because that's just the way the world is. At some point you will stop going, whether that's because it's old age and you don't want to lug yourself into your wheelchair and into your mobility scooter, or whether that's because another game system has taken your fancy, or you've accidentally had 12 children. There will be a reason at some point. But yeah, any other closing statements from everyone else, and then we'll say goodbye.
I think we just need to keep positive about it and enjoy what they give us.
You've been the most negative.
We've been. I know, but we've been wanting. People have been moaning about new models.
Yeah, that was you.
We've got. I only collect Rohan, so I'm going to have to change my whole army for this.
Yeah, you are one of the people that's bought lots of really expensive, like outrageously priced Royal Guard.
Like over £100, over hundreds of pounds on Royal Guard.
Yeah, I got that too. I got 12 Royal Guard as well, and then one with banner. So I'm a bit like, if they bring out plastic now, I'm gonna table flip.
All right then. Let's leave it there. Like I say, you can find James's content at Great Bear Gaming. We'll put a link down below. Me and Ash should have a new episode out shortly, so make sure you're subscribed and tick the bell and like this video and all that great stuff.
Subscribe
to catch the next one. But yeah, thanks everyone. We'll speak to you soon.